Good evening, everyone. I'm John OLoughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And tonight, a chapter from Jim Marrs's book, Population Control, How Corporate Owners Are Killing Us. The 2015 book, from which I've already read about 8 or 9 chapters, and going to delve into chapter 20 tonight, called Finance Capitalism. Why? Well, because I don't understand it, and I want to hear what Jim Marrs has to say. But I think more topically, my my comment a couple of shows ago about I was on the Thursday Trio about, hey, I'm about to feel like we need to have a jubilee, and I mean a jubilee here in the biblical sense of forgiveness of debts. Forgive us our debtors. Forgive us our trespasses. Um, well, just let everything go and stop allowing enforcement of debts in the court system, which is what they did during the revolution when people owed money to British banks, etc. The British banks didn't get paid because the courts wouldn't entertain their lawsuits against people that owed money. Um, we are in a position where we have to have some kind of power and to bind together on the theory of, hey, if we don't find some type of relief here, if we can't get relieved of this usury that is piled up over generations and is sitting in our negative bank account to the tune of 20 some trillion dollars, we can't carry that weight forever. We got to do something. So I was somewhat sincere in proposing that we perform a political party based upon the Jubilee, that, yeah, we are going to wipe out all of this corporate debt. And, the big examples would be student loans and things that are almost imposed upon young people now, but also these huge amounts of corporate debt, because that's just one corporation paying another, or a bank that has gotten overextended and couldn't borrow anymore. And so instead of the bank going out of business, they just call upon us in one way or another to fill in the difference with money that's basically printed on the promise that our great 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 grandchildren will still be burdened with that debt. So I'm thinking of how do we confront this without crashing the system? Because on the other hand, like some people were saying, I happen to have an investment in some loans and I would like to get my money back. Well, yeah, I'm sure you would, and you're probably a very honest person whose investment was made for all the best reasons and not speculative as what we have now. Maybe that's where they'll draw the line between a productive investment and a speculative investment, reimposing the Glass-Steagall and other regulations. But is it too late for that because of just the huge burden that's already been created? Well, I don't know. I do not know the answer. Oh, is Carlos here? Hello, Carlos Aliaga. Best to you, now back in Bolivia. And 10 days in Kenya. Well, I'm glad you made it home safe, Carlos, and best to your partner and yourself. So nice of you to visit us here on Mystery Island last summer. Yeah, the Jubilee idea is very controversial, and a lot of people will say no right out the box. But what's the alternative? Is the alternative that we're going to be carrying this horrible burden, and because it'll grind us down? You see, it's not like we can carry it. We can't, because the interest keeps growing, and our productivity doesn't grow. As a matter of fact, they're reducing our populations so that we can't. Okay. All right. Research revival, says Carlos. Get back in the race. Well, we we certainly had us a race here today, and that, as I understand, the Senate trial is over, and you know, he was acquitted. Yay! I can't celebrate a victory in such a Mickey Mouse, ridiculous, unconstitutional sham. These Democrats have gotten taken over by the nutcases. You know, maybe they've always been. I just didn't see it. But at this point, you know, Schumer, Pelosi, these people are nuts. So anyway, um, people have been asking where's Olivia been, Olivia the Osprey, and I tell you, she's been a little shy lately. She hasn't really shown her head very much in the show. But I asked her to come out tonight, and so she's just kind of like, oh, there she is. Oh, hello, sweetheart. Now, don't be shy. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up. Say hi to everybody. There. See, Olivia loves you. All right. Yeah, Olivia will be expecting all of her relatives back in just about a month now, around March the 10th. I tell you that I'm one guy that's really looking forward to spring. I'm this winter has been really difficult, and not that we've been snowed in too much or anything physically difficult, just emotionally difficult going through this horrific election and the roller coaster ride with George Webb, and how we've all gotten our channels purged and our wallets swept clean by the powers that be, in the name of censorship. Why are they censoring Americans who just want to contribute something to the national conversation? Well, I could speculate why, but the real answer is in that we ask the question at all, that why. Indeed, there is no good reason to censor American citizens speaking to each other about national issues. No reason at all. All right, let's talk about finance capitalism in the book of Jim Marrs, chapter 20. Capitalism lies at the heart of American society. The legacy of abuse of this system is death and misery. Though it's an imperfect measure, we can begin to see the impact of finance capitalism in the spike in suicides in areas affected by the recent financial collapse. Since the beginning of the worldwide financial recession in 2008, there have been more than 10,000 suicides in North America and Europe. Researchers said that this nearly 10% rise in deaths was due to lost jobs, lowered home prices, stock losses, and dwindling pensions. Furthermore, since 2002, the number of workers collecting Social Security disability insurance, SSDI checks, grew 48%, half of whom claimed disability due to mental or mood disorders, to include back pain. Dead and disabled Americans are among the most obvious reminders of the rise of giant multinational corporations and banks whose global leadership is advancing an agenda of increasingly tight control and depopulation, and all for enormous profit. The globalist agenda has been revealed for years but almost never discussed in the corporate-controlled mass media. As far back as 1966, Carol Quigley, a Georgetown University professor of history and a mentor to former President Bill Clinton, himself a member of an international Anglophile network he said operated in secrecy, wrote in his book, Tragedy and Hope, quote, "The powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences," unquote. Well, there you go. Carroll Quigley, 1966. He predicted where this is all going. Quigley explained that central banks, including the Fed, would dominate governments by their ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate foreign exchanges, to influence the level of economic activity in the country, and to, quote, influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world, unquote. Global banking interests, centered in the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, and the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, along with little-known agencies, can be found at the center of efforts to destabilize sovereign nations across the world, converting citizens into debt slaves to the globalist banking system. Sorry, I didn't bring my glasses. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry about that. There we go. Yeah, I don't need them to read so much as just for the blue light, because I do get those eye strain headaches if I don't wear my glasses, just so you know. 4 eyes. Hey, 4 eyes. Well, this is the essence of it, isn't it? To convert citizens into debt slaves. Because of a growing list of broadcast and internet talk show hosts and causes such as the Occupy movement, more and more Americans have become aware of the idea of a new world order composed of wealthy globalists and their banking interests. This concept was considered merely a conspiracy theory only a few short years ago, but today the snickering has subsided as the effects of this agenda become more obvious every day. Hidden tools of finance. Globalists, that 1% of the population composed of super rich individuals who own or control the Earth's major corporations and resources, are highly adept at using little known financial mechanisms in order to gain control over the world economy. One such hidden tool is the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the ESF, of the United States Treasury. This little-known agency has morphed into a gigantic money-moving operation with absolutely no oversight by the U.S. government. Yet, the ESF is supported by taxpayer dollars and uses its funds to carry out covert operations, both inside and outside the country. The ESF was created and originally financed by the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Then considered one of the most important bills to come before Congress since the Civil War because it shifted U.S. financial policies from Federal Reserve banks to the Treasury and hence the ESF. Its purpose, according to an official description, was to contribute to exchange rate stability and counter disorderly conditions in the foreign exchange market. The act authorized the Secretary of the Treasury to deal exclusively in gold, foreign exchange, securities, and instruments of credit subject to the approval of the President. The ESF is the mechanism by which short-term loans are made to foreign governments. As of December 2014, the ESF held more than $95 billion in assets. When ownership of gold was outlawed for Americans in 1933, the ESF transferred gold out of the country to foreigners in exchange for dollars, in turn, draining our gold reserves for years to come. Today, when people blame the Federal Reserve for stealing America's gold reserves, they should know that it was actually the ESF, the agency never scrutinized or questioned by Congress, that drained the Federal Reserve many years ago. In 1978, under agreements with the IMF, Congress amended the Gold Reserve Act to allow the ESF to provide short-term credit to foreign governments and monetary authorities. These ESF bridge loans are financed through currency swaps, which means dollars held by the ESF are made available to a country through its central bank in exchange for the same value in that country's currency. The ESF also administers special drawing rights, that is, assets created by the IMF and then loaned to countries requiring help in financing balance of payment deficits. Special drawing rights are permanent resources of the ESF, whose operations are conducted through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The New York Fed acts as an intermediary between the ESF and those foreign governments seeking short-term financing. The independent nature of the ESF has alarmed many observers. According to some members of the House Committee on Coinage, Weights, and Measures, who reviewed the gold reserve law during its preparation, quote, "This law, in fact, means that the Secretary of the Treasury shall be under no obligation to comply with general laws of the United States in handling this fund. We believe that this places autocratic and dictatorial power in the hands of one man, directly over the control of the value of money and credit, and indirectly over prices. We believe that this is too great a power to place in the hands of any one man. We believe that it is contrary to every true principle of American government." In 1940, Treasury officials began calling the ESF its, quote, "secret weapon," as millions of dollars were loaned to China to resist the Japanese invasion and to Argentina to defend against Nazi influence. Some isolationist members of Congress were unhappy with these expenditures of American tax money and were doubly unhappy to learn that the ESF was under no obligation to follow U.S. laws. The ESF has continued to hold tremendous sway over global financial policy and has been described as the largest financial agency in the world. After World War II, ESF chief Harry Dexter White helped design the world's new monetary system, including its best-known creations, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. White concurrently served on many government committees, including one that founded the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. Today, the ESF has copycat agencies in many states and itself has been accused of being a slush fund for CIA black operations. Pardon me. Hey, that's a classic picture there with Harry Dexter White with John Maynard Keynes. Keynes, of course, a relatively idiotic pseudo expert in economics whose name is quoted whenever they want to borrow some more money um, from the taxpayers. That's Keynesianism. Let the taxpayers pay for it all. Okay, so the ESF has been accused of being a slush fund for CIA black ops. There are even accusations of laundering drug money. The fund operates outside of legislative oversight and public scrutiny, and while technically legal, outside of the intentions of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. According to Lawrence Houston, the first general counsel of the CIA, quote, the heart and soul of covert operations is the provision of unvouchered funds and the inviolability of such funds from outside inspection, unquote. This is accomplished through hidden mechanisms such as the ESF. In 2008, when the Federal Reserve borrowed $90.3 billion to bail out the bankrupt AIG, the funds came through the ESF, where some staffers worried that Congress might object if the ESF's role was discovered. Former presidential candidate Dr. Ron Paul has called the ESF a slush fund hidden within the Federal Reserve System. The initial funding of the program came from taking the gold in from the people and then revaluing up so they had some money. So it's off-budget budgeting. Congress doesn't keep appropriating money. The ESF can earn enough interest buying treasury bills, but they can interfere in the market, explained Paul. The hidden nature of the ESF has caused the media to refer merely to, quote, monetary authorities, unquote, when it means the ESF, and allows the Fed to take the blame for any mistakes. Eric DeCarbonell, a prolific blogger at MarketSkeptics.com, has produced a video series revealing an immense amount of information on the ESF. He concluded that the agency, quote, controls the New York Fed, runs the CIA's black budget, and is the architect of the world's monetary system, the IMF, World Bank, etc. ESF financing through the OSS and then the CIA built up the worldwide propaganda network, which has so badly distorted history today. It has been directly involved in virtually every major U.S. fraud scandal since its creation in 1934. The London Gold Pool, the Kennedy assassinations, Iran-Contra, CIA drug trafficking, HIV, and worse, unquote. The Financial Stability Board, the FSB, is another example of the global elite's hidden centralized control over the economy. The FSB was created in 2009 when President Obama signed an agreement at a London meeting of the G20. Marilyn Barnwell, described by Forbes as, quote, the Dean of American Private Banking, noted, it seems the world's bankers have executed a bloodless coup and now represent all of the people in the world. President Obama agreed at the G20 meeting in London to create an international board with authority to intervene in U.S. corporations by dictating executive compensation and approving or disapproving business management decisions. Under the new Financial Stability Board, the United States has only one vote. In other words, the group will largely be controlled by European central bankers. My guess is they will represent themselves, not you and me, and certainly not America. The FSB was merely an outgrowth of the Financial Stability Committee of the Bank for International Settlements, which was controlled by the Nazis until after World War II. The FSB will oversee the Federal Reserve System, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and other federal agencies, thus effectively placing U.S. economic policy in the hands of international bankers. This handful of bankers is behind the flow of money necessary for the mergers and acquisitions of other banks. Once there were hundreds of banks in America, owned by individuals and local families. But due to government regulations put into place during the Reagan-Bush years, these banks have either faded away or consolidated. In 1990, there were 37 major banks in the United States. By 2009, buyouts, mergers, and bankruptcies had reduced this number to 4: Citigroup, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Ominously, in June 2012, the giant global rating agency Moody's downgraded the ratings of Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and JP Morgan, citing concerns for the stability of the world's financial system. The International Monetary Fund's 2014 Global Financial Stability Report noted that efforts to stabilize the world's financial systems were far from complete and conditions far from normal. The report stated that the probability of more taxpayer bailouts of, quote, too important to fail, unquote, banks remains high. A long-standing plan. Public apprehension over the practices of large banks is nothing new. Citizens have long been concerned by the state of the banking industry. In 1922, former New York City Mayor John OLoughlin warned, quote, "The real menace of our republic is the invisible government, which, like a giant octopus, sprawls its slimy legs over our cities, states, and nation. A small group of powerful banking houses, generally referred to as the, quote, international bankers. This little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually runs the United States government for their own selfish purposes. They practically control both parties, write political platforms, make cat's paws of party leaders using the leading men of private corporations, and resort to every device to place in nomination for high public office only such candidates as will be amenable to the dictates of corrupt big business. Hello, Joe Biden." All right. 1922, a prediction of the Joe Biden phenomenon. Just put some compliant airhead in there that, oh well, pardon me. Hello, John. Can you see me from the Twitch live chat? Yes, I see you, Research Revival. You and your little magenta icon. Yeah, hi, Research. And you are, okay, so this is, Andy must be simulcasting this onto Twitch. And I think that's Aaron that posts as Research Revival, who is on Twitch saying, "Hey, can you see me?" And I say, "Yes, I can see you." So very cool. I've been thinking about Twitch. I, I think it's a possibility. I know it doesn't have much of following yet, but they do let you do live streams. And it's rare to find, people say go to BitChute, go to Brighteon, great, but no live streaming there. So this is what we need is an alternate live stream for if and when YouTube shuts me down again. Deborah Johnson, thank you so much. I got your message, and every show I've done past month has been on Twitch. Great. This is the magic of having a team working, Yeah, I couldn't do any of this by myself. It's terrific. So thanks, guys, and we're going to keep on growing and growing and growing. We're going to be bigger than that octopus, right? We had chopped that octopus up and splinter it and cast it to the winds. The ESF, a slush fund for black ops and bailing out your buddies in the banking cartel business. That's what our country's come to. We are owned by these clever manipulators of finance capitalism. American publisher and free speech advocate Larry Flint, in a blog for the Huffington Post, described the situation thusly, quote, "The American government, which we once called our government, has been taken over by Wall Street, the mega corporations, and the super rich. They are the ones who decide our fate. It is this group of powerful elites, the people President Franklin D. Roosevelt called, quote, economic royalists, who choose our elected officials, indeed, our very form of government. In America, corporations are the government, unquote. The late outspoken comedian George Carlin offered this unfunny view of the globalists, quote, they don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They want obedient workers, people who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasing shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it, unquote. The financial crisis in the U.S. today, with its unequal income distribution, disproportionate executive pay, continuing housing and derivative bubbles, coupled with NSA surveillance, the Patriot Act, intrusive TSA manhandling, Homeland Security, ever more restrictive gun laws, militarized police forces, torture, and the classification of government critics as, quote, potential terrorists, is looking more like the country portrayed in the Hunger Games films than a democratic republic handed down by the forefathers. This situation did not come about overnight. Wealthy elites have attempted to control North America since the colonization of the continent began, and these efforts began to gain traction with the rise of the robber barons in the late 19th century. Efforts to curb the excesses of unfettered capitalism after the turn of the 20th century have resulted in the centralization of power in the federal government, which has been given greater authority to regulate industry, even as the creation of collective bargaining attempted to give more power to workers. Yet, rather than level the playing field of the owner-worker relationship, these efforts have only bolstered the few who hold real power on each side. Union power has declined sharply, even as labor leaders hobnob with business owners in country clubs and business organizations. In politics, money talks. In fact, it screams. Any politician knows that the surest way to winning an election is to buy huge amounts of time on television. TV networks and stations want political advertising paid up front, and airtime is costly. This system almost assures that political office will go to whichever candidate spends the most on TV ads, not to whoever might be the best qualified. And the court system does not appear to be the slightest bit concerned by this arrangement. The Supreme Court recently ruled that corporations can be considered the same as individuals, in that they may contribute unlimited amounts of money to the political candidate of their choice. This means large corporations can gain political support by simply opening up their pocketbook. In reality, the ability to buy political influence has widened the gap between the wealthy elite and the working poor. The globalist elite are like parasites. They feed off the population, all the while soothing us, even as they plot our extermination, as will be detailed later. These are the same elitists who engineered the rise of the Bolsheviks in 1917 Russia, but then grew fearful as the Bolsheviks turned communist and began urging class warfare worldwide. These same globalists next created National Socialism in pre-World War II Germany in an attempt to confine socialism within national boundaries. Hitler, a German army intelligence agent, was an underling in this global ruling elite's long-term ethnic extermination program, although he initially stated he was fighting international finance and loan capital. The globalists turned against Hitler only after he began building his Third Reich with Reichsmarks, interest-free money not borrowed from international bankers. Isn't that funny? You never thought of that as a parallel to President Lincoln's greenbacks, but there it is. After the war, thousands of unreconstructed Nazis were brought to America through such programs as Operation Paperclip. The Nazis who survived the war and their descendants have steadily built a Fourth Reich, expanding from the military industrial complex into corporate leadership. Along with Nazi technology, they brought Nazi philosophy, helping to explain why this elite continues to rule many nations today. Businessman and author J.R. Dunn, a consulting editor of the website AmericanThinker.com, details the shift that has taken place in the United States. What does this transformation look like overall? It involves drastically cut energy sources, seriously limited forms of transportation, 19th century or even more primitive health care, less food, expensive light sources, seriously truncated job opportunities, and higher education too expensive for any but the elite. In other words, Americans are to become poor, cold, hungry, and stupid while sitting in the dark. That's the progressive plan for the wealthiest nation in the long human record, unquote. He wrote. Well, wow, isn't that pretty much how I described this winter before I started the show? Was it feels like we're all becoming poor, cold, hungry, and stupid while sitting in the dark. Of course, this written in 2015, predicting our current lockdown, and just as we sit here, we see this happening right around us. A couple of my favorite little restaurants are closed down now. I mean, just little places, that you'd stop along the road. Charlie's Pizza, where I would go to Charlie's Pizza. I've been going there since about 1978 or so, when I was in law school, and Charlie became a friend of mine. And well, anyways, I would stop by there to get a sandwich the other day, and they had closed the dining area, and all you could do was order something to carry out, and you couldn't even wait in the building. You had to wait outside, and it was cold. So I didn't even get anything. It's just, and that's happening everywhere. All the mom and pop or the family run places are disappearing, and I don't know how they're going to come back. Yeah, it's happening right now, and it is depressing for anyone. Dunn goes on to address the rationales being used to impose control over the public. The reasons behind this don't matter. They are myriad, contradictory, and unconvincing. Global warming, fairness, equality, sharing the wealth. They change from week to week at convenience because the only true reason is power. The elite does it because they can. The placement of Nazi scientists in the American system after World War II has been well documented. The globalists who supported the Nazis merely moved them to the USA under projects such as Paperclip and implanted both technology and political philosophy within the military industrial complex. For decades, they have sought to create a world government controlled by a scientific dictatorship and guided by the principles of eugenics. That is, survival of the fittest. Who are, quote, they, unquote. One always hears of them, yet it is simplistic to blame the amorphous them for everything that is wrong with contemporary society. They are greedy capitalists. They are behind the banking excesses, the military adventurism, and the social engineering. They control the news media. They want us dead. They want to reduce the world's population. They are trying to rule the world through world government. But who exactly are they? They are the global corporate masters who have guided modern America to a culture of death from deadly drugs, food, water, and air to violent entertainment and blood sports. The culture of death created by greedy globalists has pervaded every aspect of American life. To some conspiracy researchers, these globalists are collectively referred to as the Bilderbergers, a group of powerful men and women, many of them European royalty, who meet in seclusion each year reportedly to discuss the issues of the day. This group is called the Bilderbergers because its existence was first discovered by the public in 1954 after a meeting at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland. In the past, both government and media officials declined to even mention the Bilderberg meetings, writing off concern over their gatherings as a conspiracy theory. But in recent years, that has all changed. The alternative media and even some mainstream news sources have begun covering the annual meetings. The official explanation for Bilderberg gatherings is that they are just friendly get-togethers of prominent business and government leaders, and their discussions are kept private to encourage an open exchange of ideas. But just consider the cries of, quote, restraint of trade, monopoly, and price fixing that would erupt should, say, the owners of the National Football League franchises gather behind closed doors, surrounded by armed guards, and refuse to publicly say what they discussed. A list of reported attendees from the secretive Bilderberg meeting held in Copenhagen in May of 2014 can be found in the appendix. These names will not mean much to the reader because many of these men and women are rarely mentioned in the corporate mass media. Yet, they collectively represent a concentration of wealth and power unequaled in the modern world. These are a substantial number of, quote, they, who once a year meet to deliberate the fate of national economies and hence entire populations. Many of them also believe in the mandate of eugenics, the practice of improving the human race to include reducing the population. Know that we do not have the names of every attendee. Only those who authorize the release of their names get mentioned in the public media. Daniel Estulin, author of The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, wrote that the group's membership and meeting participants have represented a who's who of the world's power elite with familiar names like David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Gordon Brown, Angela Merkel, Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, Larry Summers, Tim Geithner, Lloyd Blankfein, George Soros, Donald Rumsfeld, Rupert Murdoch, other heads of state, influential senators, congressmen, and parliamentarians, Pentagon and NATO brass, members of European royalty, selected media figures, and invited others. Such invitees have included President Obama, along with many of his top officials. Estulin said that also represented at Bilderberg meetings are leading figures from the Council on Foreign Relations, the IMF, the World Bank, the Trilateral Commission, the EU, and powerful central bankers from the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of England. David Rockefeller, the head of the Rockefeller family financial empire, is believed to have been a leading Bilderberg attendee for years. Other wealthy elite members merely send representatives. An official with Switzerland's Credit Suisse Bank has estimated the entire net worth of the world at more than $440 trillion, which is expected to rise in the coming years. By some estimates, the Rothschild banking dynasty reportedly controls up to $300 trillion in assets. In the U.S., the Rockefeller family is estimated by some to be worth about $100 trillion. If the estimates are accurate, these families collectively own or control virtually all of the world's major banks, multinational corporations, conglomerates, and oil companies. They also own massive real estate holdings, such as castles, palaces, stately mansions, luxury hotels, racetracks, casinos, exotic holiday resorts, along with large tracts of farmland and uncut forest in various countries, which explains the lack of certainty as to their wealth. Mike O'Sullivan, a chief investment officer at Credit Suisse, told CNBC that the top richest 1% of the world's population owns 46% of global assets, and it is all centered in the world's largest banks. A 2011 study by scientists at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich found that only about 24 multinational banks, named were Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase, and Goldman Sachs, controlled upward of 43,000 transnational corporations. George Sugihara, a complex systems expert and advisor to Deutsche Bank, remarked, quote, "It is disconcerting to see how connected things really are." Such a conception of power, cemented by greed, wealth, and class loyalty, has led to policies perhaps not in the best interests of all humankind. It therefore comes as no surprise that it is within the global elite where the instigators of plans to reduce the human population must be found. Well, that is the end of the chapter on finance capitalism, leading into the next chapter called Death of the Species, beginning with lots of ways in which human biology is being compromised. And we'll read about that the next time we open Jim Marrs's book, Population Control, How Corporate Owners Are Killing Us. And before we wrap it up, let me make sure and mention our sponsor for tonight. Our sponsor for tonight is Prince of Peace Original Ginger Honey Crystals. Now, you might notice tonight I've been drinking out of this beautiful mug given to me by my good friend, my good friend from college, and I have been drinking my hot ginger tea made out of original ginger honey crystals from, and let me show you what this is. So each one of these has 18 grams of honey crystals in it, and you just rip it open, and you pour it in your cup, and some hot water, stir it up, and you got a really nice ginger honey tea to keep you warm on a cold winter night here on Mystery Island. So cheers, everyone. I'll see you Monday morning. Monday morning, we have the pleasure of, let's see, what do you have Monday? Let's look at the Andy, can you put Osprey's calendar up for me? See, I don't have it on this computer. I'd have to go over there. There we go. Okay, so, all right. Now, next week, Bill Taylor. Okay, we're going to have to get that straight. It looks like we've got a possible conflict there, so I'll talk to Catherine about that. I know we do have Garland Nixon scheduled for 8 p.m., and I think Bill Taylor might be another time. So, all right. Well, I'm glad I checked. We'll find out and get that straightened out by Monday. All right. Thanks again, Andy. Thank you, Catherine Jumping Mouse, for keeping up our calendar and everything that you do. Catherine is loading our shows up to BitChute as soon as they're over here on YouTube, and that's going to help us create the archive. We are getting ready to abandon YouTube. I don't know what's going to happen first, whether we abandon them or they abandon us, but our relationship is heading to a crashing stop. So really had it with YouTube. But we need to set up a good plan first. So we'll be on YouTube, for the foreseeable couple of weeks anyway, maybe even a month or two, as we figure out how best to transition to a more friendly platform for our work. Thanks a lot. Good night.